Great, Chuck. It's absolutely amazing to have you here on this show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Chuck. Chuck, usually I kind of prepare some kind of an introduction for the people I'm interviewing, but frankly, you being Cybersecurity Person of the Year, I have nothing more to say. So I'll let you maybe start by talking about yourself. Tell our followers who you are and what you.
Sure.
I'd suggest you start maybe on the personal side, talk about family, talk about your personal life, and then if you wish, we can move very easily.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'd be happy to. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States, and moved here to Washington, D.C. I have a wife and two daughters and a dog, and I've been involved in both government here and private sector. In government, I served at the Voice of America early on as assistant to the director. Served 10 years on Capitol Hill working for the late Senator Arnold Inspector doing technology and security issues. And then I worked at the Department of Homeland Security as one of the first employees there after 9/11. I came on board and worked in the Science and Technology Directorate. In private sector, I worked for some known companies that you'll know around the world, Xerox, where I was Vice President of Homeland Security, General Dynamics Mission Systems, where I was primarily a technology scout for cybersecurity, and then also for Rapiscan, which makes a lot of the detection equipment around, particularly in Europe, where I was vice president of research and development. And since then, I've sort of semi-retired. I do a lot of writing, 350 articles. I travel around the world do speaking. Just was this year alone, I think it was Dubai and Lausanne, Rome, and many places in the United States, of course, Farnborough also in UK. So I do that, and I teach at Georgetown University. I'm a professor in cybersecurity risk management program, where I have a course, two courses actually, where I teach in students for disruptive technologies. And in that realm, I just published my first book, which is coming to newsstands October 15th, but it's available now on Amazon. It's called Inside Cyber, and it treats the issues of artificial intelligence, quantum, also 5G, IoT, and looks at it from a risk management and a privacy concern. So I'm excited about that. And as you noted, I was a cybersecurity person of the year. I have a big following on social media, 120,000 followers to my LinkedIn profile. I also have a newsletter called Security and Tech Insights that has 60,000 subscribers. So I stay very active publicly, and I'm very excited to engage with you this morning on some of the key issues I just mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely amazing. 120,000 on LinkedIn. How did that happen?
Yes. You know what happened? I think it's from all the writing and speaking. I'm a Forbes writer too, and so in dark reading and Homeland Security Today, and so it gets around it. And the more people read your articles, the more people see you at a conference,
Yes,
the more they link in with you, and it's just sort of exponential. So it's and that's over years. I mean, LinkedIn is really also, I think, during COVID, more people pivoted to LinkedIn in the workforce and to get their information and do their communications rather than other means because they couldn't go anywhere. So the digital world is here, and LinkedIn is part of it.
absolutely. Absolutely amazing. As Cybersecurity Person of the Year, Chuck, where do you see the state of cybersecurity evolving over the next 5 years?
Right now I think it's in a state of flux. I think we still have a huge problem with educating people in awareness, and that may get better, it may not. We know there's been a lot of efforts to do so. But cybersecurity has become a more difficult challenge as more and more connectivity is happening, more and more people using it for work and personal devices. And on the plus side, there's a lot of tools and ways to protect yourself, and basic cyber hygiene is effective. But unfortunately, I see it going in a bad way because what has happened now with the artificial intelligence more coming online, it's been around for a while, but the generative AI capabilities and people now using it for attacks, and also the the use of state-sponsored organizations for criminal efforts and ransomware is growing. It's more targeted, but it's growing, and I don't see a way to stop it. There's no saying it's just asymmetrical. They have to get lucky once to breach you, but you have to protect yourself, thousands of times. So that's what it is, and so I think it's going to be, basically the morph into more of a public-private partnership, because I don't think individuals and companies can do this alone, especially small and medium business. And I think that the governments are going to have to help them. And I think it's going to go more in global cooperation, because we know a lot who the bad players are, and we have to all work together, because in digital there are no boundaries.
Absolutely, Chuck. That was really my second question. That as AI now is in the hands of everybody and you can use it in any way you wish and you can make it do something, how do you see AI and Internet of Things, rapid technological advancements impacting cybersecurity strategies for businesses? In other words, I'm trying to
Yes.
understand your
Yes.
view on how companies, businesses can manage their cybersecurity strategies as AI is growing and in the hands of everybody, Internet of Things is growing, it's in the hands of everybody, and those could be used for cybersecurity purposes.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point. It's already difficult for particularly for small and medium businesses. I think some of the large ones have the skills and the tools to thwart many of these attacks. But so they go where they're not, the lowest hanging fruit, where the hackers go. So I think, AI, you're right. It can be, you can go to the dark web, get a hacker toolkit, and then use your generative AI to create all kinds of phishing attacks, and that's what's happening. Those are problematic, but it's really again, I think it's the more sophisticated actors, these criminal gangs that are using ransomware and targeting industries like healthcare, education, and finance and manufacturing, that pose a bigger danger. And I think that the only explanation I think I could give is that, we need to prioritize cybersecurity much more as a business in industries, and you need to fortify yourselves much more. That means encryption. That means stronger firewalls. That means segmenting your information and backing it up, and that means educating your employees, basic cyber hygiene with strong passwords and not to click on fishes. But they're going to get through eventually. So it really is more about incident management and resilience, and I think that's where the trends are, because likely everyone's going to get hacked at some point, or identity stolen. It's just too easy, and there are a lot of things that just tools you can use to prevent that. But so I think that one of the things that's happened here is, I think that there's more expansion of people being trained in cybersecurity with certificate courses, education. I think it's got to turn more and more into a field as we connect with all this AI and everything else in every industry. That we really look at cybersecurity is really a element of operations and business, not as a cost item.
I genuinely love what you said. So every company can expect at some point of time to be hacked. It's only about incident management and about how you can reduce this risk. Tell me, please, a little bit more about this. Because when I say to people, everybody at some point of time will get
Yeah.
in some way, people say, no, you're exaggerating. We have invested a lot of money in our cybersecurity. This can't happen. It would be a catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, there are just too many ways in, right? Anyone could click on a fish, and there's also insider threats, and most of it is negligence. And there's also issues of misconfigurations, and we saw that recently with CrowdStrike. Just that wasn't cyber attack, but that was just an upload of a patch, and it took out half the world. So it's just too easy. So right, when you prioritize resilience and incident response, you know that at least you're going to have a plan in place. If you do get hacked, you should have your data backed up, another source. So if you're hit with ransomware, none of that, your data should be encrypted, but you should also have a plan of action for your CEO, your VPs, your marketing, your legal. It's a reputational issue, right? So anything to deal with resilience is important, particularly if you're in a supply chain where you're supporting other companies, or if you're a public company that has a stock to promote. So I think that yeah, resilience and incident response is key, and this kind of training can be done. It can be automated, and not only that, I think you have to practice it. I think you have to assume you're going to get hacked, and then what course, every industry and business is a little different, but there are plenty of NIST has a lot of frameworks to use and protect yourself, and sort of other places. But the idea is to be expect it and be trained to prepare for it, and have your people know their roles, and also have your, particularly most important, have your key data and sensitive data protected, so it's not stolen, or if it is stolen, you have a backup to it.
Absolutely. If they stolen, you have a backup. Absolutely. This is what I kind of keep repeating whenever I'm talking about those issues, that you should have at least a backup copy so that if something happens, then you can still restore your data. But unfortunately, sometimes really it strikes me, and I find it very difficult to understand how some companies decide to cut budget on the cybersecurity and to take some risk. And then when
It,
things happen, they go bananas. Like, how come?
yeah. They don't, they, again, they don't budget cybersecurity the way they should. I mean, they'll spend money in sales and marketing or procuring some things and maybe accounting. But cybersecurity, is really the core of everything that holds the operations together. It's the vitality of the business, its persistence and capabilities are all dependent upon having strong cybersecurity. When they cut those budgets, they don't know what they're doing. The problem is that you just can't spend. You also have to know what you're spending on, and there's a lot of different kind of products and tools, and you have to be able to evaluate them. So I think you need to bring in cybersecurity expertise, or I think one of the other trends, if you're a smaller medium business, maybe managed security, where you outsource it, where you have some expertise. But there are other things to do too. I mean, you could use the cloud. It's not invincible, but having someone else like protect your data, like a Microsoft or Amazon or IBM or anyone that has some sort of security built in the cloud, still lessens your chances of getting hacked. So I think a lot of small businesses could do a lot more than they're doing right now.
100% agree. Okay, Chuck, with your experience briefing the G20 on energy cybersecurity, what would you consider the most pressing issue in critical infrastructure protection today?
I think that the fact of that there's a big lesson, I think, in Colonial Pipeline. What happened? It was a mixture of the IT and OT systems. They thought, sort of the cross pollination, and most energy and oil systems now are legacy systems. They're built many 20, 30 years ago, and they're dependent upon on this industrial, capabilities. But now they're meshed with IT capabilities, and few understand the fact though that there are different kinds of security involved, and you have to be able to have a risk management approaches for both of them. And you also have to have a risk management approach the fact that they may be intertwined. So I think, with Colonial Pipeline, they just gave up and did, gave up a ransomware. But I think most oil and gas and other places right now need to understand that connection. They've already been an attack. BP gets hundreds of thousands of attacks a year, so do a lot of other places, and of course, Saudi Aramco has been under attack over and over. So I think what you need to do, I think, is look at that in a special sense that you need to do. Obviously, security by design and defense in depth, because the types of attacks you're getting are usually state sponsored, or at least state sponsored expertise. So this is a different game when you're talking about critical infrastructure. And the other problem is that there's a lack of really OT experts, cybersecurity experts in that area. They're few and far between, and the oil and gas industry, they need to train more. And the other thing is, I say that you need in that industry itself, you need more cooperation among their conferences. And speaking to the G20, they're some of the people at the table, of course, are some of the same ones sponsoring the attacks. So you have to be careful what you say. But I think that industry itself needs to glue together and share best practices in threat intelligence. And I think they do some of that already now in a lot of the oil industry because they have to. But you have to look at these kind of things in a basically under magnifying glass, and understand the new threats. And also the other thing is a lot of this now could be also automated. A lot of these defenses. So I think some of these technologies, they certainly have the money to put it in, and they're doing it. But nonetheless, they're still targets.
100% agree, absolutely. Chuck, the rise of AI is transforming industries across the board, right?
Yes.
How do you see AI intersecting with cybersecurity practices? How do you see AI standing on the side of businesses defending them?
Well, I think you have to look at it as a tool, right? And look at the things that it can do right now. One of the things it can do right now is help you write reports. A large part of Security Operations Center activities are looking at writing reports on incidents. They take time. They take hours and hours a day. When you get a lot of them and you get a lot of false positives, it's problematic. The other thing I just said, false positives, AI can help discern what is real and what is not real. It looks at the anomalies, looks at the patterns, And often with reporting in cyber, you get a lot of different things, a lot of things that are not real threats that but they're thrown in there, and you find out later on that no, it was just a glitch. So that can be helpful there too. The other thing is it could do is could automate the threat intelligence too. You could link into a lot of different databases to understand what the latest and greatest threats are out there, how they're being used, and then you could prepare your defenses from it. So it has a lot of applications already, and I think that a lot of these are here. They're mostly machine learning, really, capabilities, but they're expanded in their capabilities over the last few years, and as we experience more and more of a boom in AI in our computing too. We're gonna see more development and more uses for AI. On the flip side, of course, the adversaries already have it and they're using it. They pay people very well to come and work for them, and they use these phishing attacks, automated attacks, and other things that are even more nefarious to break in and breach. So it's a war out there. So and AI is playing on both sides.
Indeed, it is a war out there, and AI is playing both sides. I 100% agree with you on this. But when you talk to smaller companies, Chuck, they will tell you, we're not Amazon, we're not Microsoft, we don't have this huge budget for security, so we had to cut somewhere. And they believe that they have to accept not to be protected, not to have a proper backup strategy because they are smaller companies. As somebody who has worked with all kinds of companies, from startups to Fortune 1000 companies, how do cybersecurity needs differ across these scales? And how can smaller companies build resilient frameworks at lower budgets?
Yes, no, that's a good question because you're right. A lot of them are naive. The fact is that when smaller companies are hit with a breach, 50% of them go out of business automatically. So that's the reality of it. So to neglect cybersecurity is almost suicidal for them to do, and that you have to explain to them. However, to protect yourself, they used to be that they think they're so obscure and no one's going to know them. But anyone that has any kind of retail or commercial practice as a company is a target because we're all digitally connected. And they can discover you. It's very easy to do. It's not that they're going through the yellow pages and looking at businesses. They can do this online, and they know all the IP addresses, and they'll hit them all. So as a small business, you're not going to be by being small, you're still a target. The thing that they could do, and everyone could do that's not costly, is basic cyber hygiene. We're in Cybersecurity Awareness Month right now, and still the biggest problem is that people don't use multi-factor authentication, which I think is really important, because that's the first line of defense against most hackers. If they get in right away and get your password, which passwords can be strong. Of course, a lot of people have issues with passwords, and I think eventually they'll go out of a favor, but right now having strong passwords is important too, but multi-factor authentication is more important because at least if it's done in an automated attack, it'll make it less likely that you're going to get breached. The second thing is that their employees should be aware. You should have some sort of protocols in place. They can go as I said earlier, they can go to a NIST and find a risk management plan and operate some of it that are not so sophisticated to put basic training. They could make sure that their firewalls and routers are protected. And if they need it, if they're a business, and I recommend it, there's plenty of business encryption software out there that's not expensive. And again, really, what you're doing is you're just fortifying yourself. And the other thing I think for any business, not just small, and this is a pattern that came through government largely because they recognize that there's so many people and so many devices now attached to networks that they didn't know who's who and who has access and what. And so a theme called zero trust emanated, and this has now become more accepted in industry as well as government. It's required in government that you first see everyone that and anything that's connected to your network, your business, if you're a small business, and you want to make sure that there may have been an employee who left who still has access. You want to make sure that not everyone has access to everything, and identity access management is really important in this sense. So all these things don't cost a lot of money. All those things could be done pretty easily. And I also recommend that no matter what business you are, you have sort of some occasional pen testing. I mean, it really it helps, but I mean, it should really be perpetual and continually monitored. But I know everyone can't afford that. And then finally, what I said earlier is there are managed services out there that are all different prices and depending what you need. And you could find these managed service providers out there, and I recommend that highly for most businesses because they're not going to have the internal cyber expertise to do this. And again, then put the budget in, put this in. Just say this is operational cost. This is not this is something you need, and you cannot be be try to cut corners on this because this is something that's going to keep you in business.
Thank you very much for those insights, Chuck. Chuck, given your background in Homeland Security, what role should governments play in supporting the private sector in cybersecurity efforts?
I think that's a great question. I think when it first started, Homeland Security didn't have at least the United States didn't have the capabilities. They created CISA 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and they built a whole cybersecurity agency basically where with the expertise and capabilities. What we're finding now, and this is because of these emerging technologies, and this is also because of the threat actors being states in organized crime, basically, and you have your hacktivists and all those people. But I think that it's essential now for the public sector to partner with the private sector because private sector can't do it alone, particularly with critical infrastructure. Or a lot of these like water and energy and stuff are easy targets. They don't have the people and the expertise, and government needs to take a bigger role in doing that. They're doing that here, but they need to do this globally. And I think that without that kind of cooperation, they need to, government has ability to get better threat intelligence. They spend a lot more money on knowing who the threat actors are and what's the latest things out there. They put out notices, but I think that's not enough. I think what you need is you need a direct cooperation, and it needs to expand. And you're going to see more and more of that. I think just because of the capabilities growing and the difficulties now for any business to defend themselves. You look at it and you see every day the big guys, even Microsoft, get hit. So, and if they get hit, what's a small medium business going to do? So you need to do that. And also, I'd bring more of the big tech, and they're doing this now in there to work together. I mean, their competitors may be in the marketplace, but some of these solutions should be provided uh, to to communities, particularly to smart cities or to state and local, to help them from the big ones, because state and local is also one of those areas where there's very little budget and very little expertise, and this is municipalities all over the world are really vulnerable, and if the federal government needs to step in to help them too.
So federal governments need to step in to help them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
It's just the world is just too precarious and too sophisticated for most companies and business to deal with alone.
Absolutely. Okay. Chuck, you've provided briefings and consultancy to the US Embassy, even to the Vatican, on global
Yes.
cybersecurity cooperation. How important is international collaboration in mitigating cyber threats? And how could this be done in a context where you have major world conflicts?
No, that's a not an easy task, but it's growing in the right direction. I think GDPR is a good example in Europe of collective cybersecurity approaches. This is more for privacy, of course. But there is a lot of different countries involved and a lot of expertise being shared. I think there's a lot of bilateral cooperation. I know between the United States and a lot of countries, particularly those on the front lines in conflict. What's going on with Ukraine and all the Baltic states are U.S. is all over there. So as you're a lot of European companies helping them with cyber. But conflicts are one thing. But I think that really, if you're looking at international commerce, you're looking at supply chains that are global, right? They're not necessarily based in one country. They're all over the place. We're all interconnected right now. So global cooperation is really cool to get the standards together. Like take for example IoT. There's really no standards. There's a lot of standard organizations, but you have millions of different devices with different kinds of defaults, passwords, and you need to be able to understand what they are, who's making them, where they're at, and what the threats are, and put out these threat intelligence on all those devices. That's an important thing to do. You also need to share best practices, what's working in a global communication. And finally, I think one of the biggest things is the prosecution. Most of these hackers, and I'm talking not talking about the state ones because you really can't do much about them, except cyber warfare. But I'm looking at they're making off with lots of money in cryptocurrency and ransomware, and they're difficult to prosecute. There's been some success lately by the FBI here, but that takes international cooperation because they're operating in a lot of mostly in Eastern Europe actually, in a lot of these countries, and they're also under the protection of these countries. So it's not in the interest of Russia to prosecute someone that's hacking U.S. critical infrastructure. They think it's a great thing. I think it's a nuisance, and they probably share in some of the wealth of the ransomware. So I think it's a very difficult challenge. So I think the free world, and this includes everywhere around the world, needs to really convene and work on protocols that can be enacted for small and big countries together. And I think you'll see more of this cybersecurity cooperation grow as we tend to understand some of the threats out there and how to deal with them.
Absolutely. Um, Chuck, I had an interview a few days ago with a compliance expert, and when I put to her the question that some companies say that we cannot be 100% compliant and at the same time be innovative, she got really excited and she said, "This is total nonsense, absolute nonsense. You can be 100% compliant and you can be innovative." I would like to put to you the question of how can businesses integrate cybersecurity into their digital transformation efforts without killing innovation?
Yeah, I think compliancy is it depends. It depends what industry it is, right? I mean, all of them are different. Some are difficult and arduous tasks, but they're arduous tasks because they're usually critical infrastructure and they're dealing with utilities or something like that where you need to really have a high level of compliance. So, yeah, compliance is just an aspect of anything else, just like accounting, right? It could be mundane and troublesome, but you need to do that because you need to understand the limitations and things going on that may impact your business. And so it's not either or is what I'm saying. I think innovation is a separate thing. Most companies, at least medium and larger size ones, have an R&D shop. They do their R&D separate from all that compliance. So I think they're different things. And really compliance comes under legal, and then everything else comes under the CTO, the CIO, and the CISO in a company. So I think they're separated, but there are crossovers. Obviously, compliance has issues with cybersecurity too because the requirements. I know in the U.S. they're going to be introducing CMMC, which is compliance for the Department of Defense vendors, which is going to be difficult because they're going to have to go and learn a lot of the frameworks. They're going to have an understanding with cybersecurity, and most of them, these vendors don't have cyber expertise. But I think in this world, you have to really up your game, and compliance is upping your game. At least it's not security, but it's upping your game in awareness, and any of those steps lead to better security.
Thank you for those insights, Chuck. I was having a discussion this morning with my partner, and she was talking about the fact that Amazon now is asking all employees to come back and work from the office, no more remote work. And that reminded me when COVID-19 hit, how everybody wanted to do remote work, but a lot of businesses knew that they were taking very serious risk by allowing everybody to connect from their own PCs, which are not secured, which are not company PCs. What are some of the best practices for educating employees on cybersecurity risks, especially that a lot of companies still apply remote work?
Yeah. I'm still in favor of remote work because I think productivity is often better. People working remote, they're happier, they better allocate their time. But I understand the implications of needing to be a team and work together, and particularly with larger companies. We have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of different divisions. And I think that hybrid may be the best of all alternatives. But you're right, there are challenges, and a lot of early on where the fact is that all of a sudden, when being one office with 100,000 employees, you're 100,000 offices, right? So each one of those, and you lose the administrative oversight of who's controlling your PC. And initially there were a lot of breaches because people were mixing their personal stuff with the business stuff. They didn't have requisite firewalls. A lot of this stuff has changed now. Again, I think it's a lot of it is cyber hygiene, but I think the companies now could put out software updates They can do a lot more remotely than they could in 5 years ago in checking PCs, making sure that they're required, and they can actually control more too on the PCs themselves. So I think that the problem again is still the human. The humans have a tendency to do the wrong things and share the wrong things, and I don't think that's going to change. But at least it can be done remote anyway when they go home. So I think that these challenges are being met. I think that there's been a lot of improvement. I think that the viability of remote work is still strong, and I don't think it's so much a security concern anymore. I really think it's more of a business concern for places like Amazon, where they want to make sure that their employees are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and also they're very stringent in the way they operate. So from what I hear, I don't know, I never worked there, but so I think that's maybe a personal decision by the company.
Okay. Chuck, blockchain is often discussed as a tool for enhancing cybersecurity. Where do you see blockchain fitting into the future of secure systems?
Well, I think it's already there in a lot of systems. It's integrated. It's primarily used as a ledger system, so you can isolate and track things. And it's done in accounting. It's done with real estate deeds and et cetera like that. And it's done a lot through government with robotic process automation and blockchain combined. So I see it as a part of cybersecurity. Blockchain has a lot of its uses. It has they say that there's a bit more scalability now, but it has issues of scalability, and it's being used now a lot. I think with maintaining on the platforms with cryptocurrency too. So I see it, as a ledger, as a functional ledger, and it has protected. But I think that's I think that what we're looking in cybersecurity is we're looking at really a fusion of different technologies. You talk about AI, you talk about blockchain, you talk about all these different things. Um, they work together and combine, and I think some of the innovation that we're just talking about comes from ways to find out to make them more innovative. And I think that's where blockchain is going to be mostly useful.
All right. Chuck, you've served on National Academy of Science advisory groups. There are a lot of emerging technologies today. What emerging technologies are you most excited about for improving the cybersecurity resilience?
Well, of course, AI. I mean, because that again is what's happening there and the expansion of particularly with generative AI, but also other types of machine learning and stuff are expanding in capability, and it's being used right now. We're going to see more and more of that. But around the corner, I think we have quantum. And a couple of years ago, I was writing about quantum. I thought, well, maybe it's a decade away. Now I see it's around the corner, and you see it by the investments going on by countries. You see it already with the photonic computing now being developed and used, which is actually quantum in a sense, and quantum algorithms. And in fact, the U.S. is now requiring for government vendors that they have quantum resistant algorithms. So that's where it's going. And quantum is going to be combined with AI. And when you do that, you're going to have a superpower kind of capability in computing and in analytics, particularly synthesizing information automatically, millions of times faster than you could with a classical computer. So that's where I think it's exciting. There's a lot of other technologies that are, you just look at the nanotechnology world and how things are getting miniaturized and capabilities. And I think one of the areas to look at is health and medicine. Some of the stuff they're doing with genomics and this nanotechnologies and using AI to for looking at for drug discovery. All these things are very exciting to me. But for cybersecurity specifically, I think AI is still on a learning curve, and so we've got a few more years to see what comes out of it. But it's definitely going to be the key thing.
Great. Chuck, you mentioned earlier 120,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I'm sure that this helps you actually get your voice very, very far on LinkedIn.
Yes.
My question to you is, with this experience, with your experience in content strategy and digital branding, how can cybersecurity professionals like yourself leverage personal branding to educate and raise awareness?
I think it's happening now, and it's interesting you say that. There's a group of us that have been doing this for like a decade, and we're all friendly. We're never, we work for a lot of the same brand. And sometimes companies ask us to do stuff, and we always recommend each other. So it's really, the camaraderie is really excellent. But I think anyone now that has the ability to write has the capability on LinkedIn to self-publish for one thing. I mean, it's easy to do. And I tell my students they should be doing that. You write great papers. Okay, don't let it end in the class, revise them, put them for public consumption. And they're doing that. I think it's also really important to get involved in a lot of these groups and stuff because it's also educating yourself because when I used to go to every, publication and see what's out. I still do, but it's time consuming. But you can go to some of these LinkedIn groups out now in cyber, in Homeland Security, whatever, and you'll get some posts that immediately catch you. This is the latest. This just happened. This breach happened. Why it happened. The analysis is great. And I think the more people share and do these kind of things, the more they're discovered. I think for career purposes, if you have a LinkedIn profile, you don't just want to have a list of things you do and be a resume. You want to have something living in your ability to analyze, your ability to communicate. So an employer could look at and see on your profile, wow, this is a great article. This is maybe cybersecurity awareness. I didn't know this or whatever. So I think we're given an advantage right now, with the digital world to basically brand ourselves and do things that we didn't have a decade ago, because everyone's on it. And and not, so some social medias frankly, a lot of misinformation and silly, and some of the things in TikTok and stuff. But LinkedIn is really more professional. And of course, there's obviously employment seeking and all that kind of stuff. But, for the most part, you can go and you can find almost anyone from any government, who's an official. You can find anyone from who's in leadership in every corporation. And I recommend that, particularly younger people, try and network with some of these people saying, I follow your work and do you mind if I connect? And often they'll find a career path that way, or they'll learn who is hiring or where. So I think that's good for it too. But in terms of thought leadership, the more you write, the more you speak, the more you do, the more you're discovered, and the more you in self improve too. Because one of the things that people, about being out there in the public realm is you have to know your stuff and you have to continually update yourself. I mean, you may have had experiences and done stuff in companies and stuff, but what you did 10 years ago is almost obsolete because things are changing so fast with these new technologies and new protocols and new events every day. So you really need to read and everyone needs to do that if they're in cybersecurity and see what's out there.
You mentioned that, and I would like to come back to that if you allow me. So
Sure.
we've spoken about the positive role that social media can play in spreading information and awareness. But I would like to insist with this question on the misinformation that could happen on social media. What role do you see social media platforms playing in the spread of misinformation? And how do you think they can improve cybersecurity measures to prevent those disinformation attacks?
Yes. I guess that's a tough question. Only because first of all, the private sector controls, not the government control. And listen, the United States, a lot of countries that's not the case, but the media. So it's the Facebooks and everyone else out there that's doing that. LinkedIn's or who they determine by their own biases of what should be censored and what shouldn't be censored. So there's no laws except for in the case that they do get federal funding, a lot of them to really rein them in. From a personal sense, I think that it's very difficult. There's a plenty of I think most places have misinformation. It's just people's opinions, right? And they just plaster them everywhere, and particularly when you deal with politics, figure that it's going to be biased in most issues. With cybersecurity, it's really a more linear thing. It's about what happened or what's going to happen. So cybersecurity is one of the issues that you don't have to worry about too much misinformation, unless you're out there a hacker trying to do stuff that's and lure someone. But I think to put controls certainly on hate and violence. I mean that I think could be done anywhere, and maybe that needs to be promoted globally because it's we have a human history of it, right? It's not new. It goes back thousands of years of barbarism and killing each other. So, when people put up those violent stuff on online and stuff, there's no reason for it. There's no reason that should be allowed. It's not free speech, in my opinion. And when you hate, ethnic groups or racism, that's the other thing too. That there's no place for that in free communications. Now I know every country has its own laws on that, and the United States is very open on it. But I think, again, these are private companies, and they could easily institute these kind of requirements. Say, let's make this a positive thing. And some of them say they try and do that, but they really don't do a good job of doing it.
100% agree. And I would like to remind myself and remind everybody and the people watching us of the day when Twitter blocked the Twitter account of Mr. Trump. And that was a humongous decision here. And that was a humongous discussion over here on how can you block the president of the United States from expressing himself. And others say, no, what he is doing is disinformation. And exactly as you said, it's a private company and they have their own laws. What were your feelings on that day?
Well, I don't think, political people should be blocked generally. I mean, they're already elected or in candidate as a candidate, and I think that kind of thing, unless they're saying go out, we're going to go out and kill everybody or something like that, but then they wouldn't be a candidate for very long anyway. But I think they have the right. You could like their opinion or hate their opinion, but they're a public figure, and they're running for office, and they have a right to communicate to the what they believe, and that's probably the way to do it. And say, well, I don't agree with that. Well, don't vote for the person, but don't block them. I mean, that's just it doesn't make sense. And again, I think it's an abuse of of bias and political and trying to manipulate things, and you shouldn't do that. I mean, it shouldn't be the case. Of course, there's other realms when you get someone like a Hitler. Obviously they didn't have the capability to block stuff back then in communications, but that's a different story. But I think there are other means that before social media that will take care of that. So I think that's just the real world right now. But blocking a president is not a good policy.
Okay, Chuck, as a professor at Georgetown, how do you approach educating next generation of leaders in cybersecurity and risk management?
Well, I do it a little differently. With my experience is that their soft skills are really important to think critically, and my students, I try and instill that. It's very much of an interchange. It's a discussion of the events and topics. Of course, the risk management, frameworks, et cetera, and stuff are out there and are taught. But I think that they have to be able to apply it to the real world. A lot of them are already working. A lot of them are graduate students working in government and industry, or they're doing this part time, some are full time. But I think students right now are growing up in a different era, and the way they get their information and how they get it and distill it is a lot different than people did it just recently in the past. There's the research is all online right now. The artificial intelligence to help them write stuff is there too, unfortunately. But because I tell them they need to do their own stuff. But so I think really the key thing is you have to be able to look at things and distill them in a proper sense, and it's really training the mind to learn and to think for itself, not to be a follower, but to be able to judge on your own and take the leadership by knowing the facts and knowing the materials. And so I think they learn it quicker when they're not sitting there taking quizzes and tests constantly, but really writing about it. Particularly, I encourage a lot of writing and discussing it on what we call Canvas, which is the online platform, and in class. So I think those combination I think is works, and I see that formula. It's called a lot of times the Socratic method and other things like that too. And I think, but it goes back to really what the old universities used to do. Instead of going and basically telling people what to think, they basically discussed it. And that's what we used to be at Oxford and those places, Chicago, where I came from. You sit there and you'd have dialogues. Whether you agree or not is one thing, but I think there's too little of that now.
Yeah, yeah. European countries are regularly taking steps towards digitalization and having everybody on the cloud and having invoicing and taxation all being digitalized, but they're doing this step by step. Yesterday, for example, I received a letter from German authorities concerning our German company saying that there is a new law saying that as of the 1st of January 2025, you have to be ready to accept all sorts of digital invoices, and that your digital invoices has to follow certain formats, which would allow actually automation. And here is my question to you. This is, as I see it, one more step towards slightly nudging companies to go to the cloud and to start using cloud services. But as you know, still today, at least here in Europe, for a lot of people, having a server outside the walls of their own company is a scary idea because people are still not fully confident that the cloud does have enough security in their perspective. In your opinion, as an expert on the matter, what are the critical cybersecurity considerations for organizations transitioning to cloud-based services?
Well, that's a good point. There is a thing. I don't know if in Europe it's accepted. There are a lot of hybrid clouds where you can keep some of your data, particularly your most valuable data on-prem, and keep most of the other things like the invoicing and stuff, et cetera, in the cloud. I don't know if that's so accepted, but that's more and more what's happening here. Initially, we thought, there's a still big a lot of people evolving into the cloud, but there are a lot of companies that held back because they fear sharing their data, because really what you're doing is exactly what you said. You're giving your data to someone else to handle, and there are risks, but for the most part, those risks are less than what most small and medium businesses have, because at least those clouds have encryption. Usually, they usually have professionals constantly, security operations centers monitoring them, everything else like that. They're targets too, and the problem is if one gets breached, everyone gets breached. But I think the reality is that we're moving to a cloud-based world. It's slower than I thought it would happen, because initially it was quicker. I mean, I understand with a lot of legacy systems in government and bigger companies, it's a very difficult process. But for small companies, it's pretty easy. So again, my recommendations for them is look at a hybrid cloud. Look at where you can keep certain data with you that you don't want maybe a competitor to have, or something that gets breached, that it's lost and it's devastating your business. But I think you should be wary about everything, where anywhere you have your data, and investigate it thoroughly. Which cloud provider is the one you think is the most secure. Now, of course, these Amazon and Microsoft are the clouds for the Department of Defense and other places here in the United States. So there are different degrees of security in the cloud too. So I think you have to look at those options too.
Right. Chuck, how important is cybersecurity public-private partnership? I mean, how could this collaboration, public-private, help in fighting cyber threats? And where do you see room for improvement in these collaborations?
Yes, that's a topic that's been talked about recently, because there's a thought that some industries there's not enough collaboration here with the public sector. They're not providing enough threat intelligence data and stuff like that. I think, again, I think going back, I think the big role of government is particularly that it has the ability to understand, through its networks in U.S. certain other places where the problems are, what needs to be patched, what the threats are out there, and it's able to provide that to the private sector in a timely manner. But I think where it needs to expand, I think, is in the close cooperation and maybe recommendation of what tools are used for security, and where the gaps and vulnerabilities may be in some of these companies. And it's almost acting as a managed service. But I think because of as I mentioned earlier, the threats from state-sponsored actors are so much more difficult to defend against for companies, and particularly critical infrastructure alone, that they need to go in, and it needs to be a stronger partnership to look at where they could bolster these defenses, and how they can do it, and not just threat intelligence, but actually provide recommendations for the right tools to orchestrate, and where they need to measures they need to take for their incident response, etc. So I think the government has a lot of expertise. Can't be everywhere, but I think it needs to definitely be a stronger public-private partnership, particularly in the United States here, but everywhere.
Chuck, what is your perspective on this cybersecurity skills gap that we see everywhere? I mean, personally, I stayed a while in northern Germany, and having proper cybersecurity skills is very, very difficult. All of those people are already employed somewhere, and a lot of companies say, we're willing to invest, but we can't find somebody who is really qualified, and we would like somebody on site. How can we bridge this gap? And how can we encourage more professionals to enter the cybersecurity field?
Yeah. Well, that's been the quest going on for years. It started with STEM, trying to get more, particularly women. I mean, it's really a man-dominated field, particularly that in IT. It's changing a little bit, but not quick enough. And there are plenty of women out there that have these skills and capabilities that can build those skills. I think that's the first step. It's not just them too. I think you could take other government and other industries and cross train, and that's what's happening. States are training veterans now. They just put out grants to the Native Americans who are underprivileged and basically living impoverished, a lot of them, to train them in cybersecurity with grants and give them, because it can be, like I said, it can be done remote. And I think there's a lot of certificate programs out there. I know CompTIA and others are training people. The biggest complaint I have a lot from students is that they get these basic backgrounds and understandings, and they go up, but they're entry level. And when they go out there, the companies say, well, you need to have this, and this. And so it's to start. But really, companies need to change their attitude too. I think they need to go in with a bigger, welcoming for people that are not necessarily experienced and have all those capabilities and qualifications yet, but actually let them grow in the company. And I think they'll also be more likely to stay in the company, because one of the biggest problems is attrition with a lot of these companies, where the bigger offer somewhere else. And so it's a big problem. It's a global problem. We're still understaffed, and I think automation will help close some of those gaps, but not enough of them. But I think the more we talk about cyber, and the more people get excited about the profession and the capability, because it's a broad profession. I mean, you're talking about the technical right now, but there's a lot of other aspects to cybersecurity too, and the policy ends, and like I said, the compliance, everything else, governance. So and sales and marketing. So you're really looking at the whole spectrum. So the more we get people interested in cyber, I think will help close the gap. Excuse me.
No worries. Okay. Chuck, you've seen a lot of developments in your cybersecurity over the years, right? What do you think is that businesses must be really prepared for as a trend in the next decade?
Well, I think for what I said earlier, I think they're going to probably be more susceptible to quantum attacks. I think in the next decade that'll happen. Maybe not immediately, but that'll be something that'll happen. I think already what we mentioned AI. If they're not prepared for AI attacks, they need to be ready right now. That's certainly a capability, and I think that the threats continue to grow every year. They're more sophisticated. We're seeing now other things with AI, where we used to have polymorphic malware, which changes, basically can obfuscate itself and get through and do stuff. But now with AI, it almost has a capability, to avoid being discovered. And so you're facing some amazing challenges that really need, and this goes back to the public-private cooperation, that we really have to look at, what are the biggest threats, categorize them, and basically implement procedures and bring in tools to prevent them from happening. So I think just logically right now, AI is going to, because of the phishing attacks, which is still the number one attack for getting anywhere. It's most is email or attachments. Still, most companies are breached through phishing. That those areas, we're going to have to continually to train employees and basically again, you implement a lot of the automation to help discover and prevent some of these from getting through.
Great, absolutely great. Finally, maybe as my last question to you today, how is Brooks Consulting International doing? Any exciting projects? Any ideas?
Yeah, well, my newest project, of course, is my book. So I'm in the promotion mode there, and this is my first book, so I haven't done promoting. I have another one in the works, but so I'm eager to do that. So I'll be doing probably a lot of global conferences again and stuff like that. As a consultant, I always stay busy. I mean, there's always companies out there asking, whether it be actual cybersecurity or actually being branding or influencing. There's a lot of that is and that's the interesting thing. That world of branding and influence, it makes a lot of sense because companies already have their internal people usually, and it's a 40-hour work week or more for them. but they don't have the time to go out and basically promote and brand their companies. They have a marketing department, but marketing people are not usually cyber people. So that field is sort of taking off. It's an interesting world, and people are looking for influencers and thought leaders. So it's a good time to be one of those, and so I enjoy that, and that's actually fun. Like this is fun talking. It's not very meticulous work that you have to go through and do, and look at in a cybersecurity sense. So I enjoy that kind of thing. I want to continue to do more of that, and maybe some more boards and do those too, because you learn a lot from boards.
Absolutely. It would be absolutely great to have you again for another interview where we see the book in your hand.
I'd be happy to do so. Really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Chuck. It was a great discussion, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.